Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a world so profoundly quiet, so incredibly mundane, that it makes watching paint dry look like an extreme sport. We're immersing ourselves in the quiet, mundane world of medieval spice grinders. Picture this, a small, dusty workshop, probably tucked away down a narrow medieval alleyway somewhere in, say, 13th century London or Paris. The air is thick with the ghostly aroma of 1,000 forgotten meals and remedies, and your entire existence revolves around the rhythmic thud and scrape of stone against stone. Frankly, the sheer, unadulterated boredom of pulverizing peppercorns day in and day out means you probably won't survive this auditory experience without achieving a state of deep, blissful unconsciousness. Which, naturally, is the entire goal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, do drop your current location and local time in the comments below. It's always a gentle delight to see from which corners of the globe you're all drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first light of dawn is a hesitant, gray smear seeping through the cracks in your wooden shutters. It doesn't so much announce the new day as reluctantly admit its arrival. You stir on your straw-filled pallet, which rustles softly beneath you like dry leaves. The air in your small, attached living quarter, a space barely large enough for the pallet and a small chest, is cool and carries the faint, lingering scent of yesterday's labors, a ghostly whisper of ginger, a phantom tang of clove, the faintest memory of pepper that still tickles your nostrils. It's a perfume far more complex and, frankly, more persistent than any expensive modern fragrance. You've tried washing it out of your tunic, but the spices have become a part of the fabric, a part of you. You are, in essence, a walking potpourri. A yawn, wide and creaky as an old door hinge, escapes you. Your muscles ache with a dull, familiar throb, a testament to the repetitive nature of your craft. Being a medieval spice grinder isn't for the faint of arm or the easily bored. It's a life measured in pestle strokes and the fineness of powders. You sit up, the rough wool of your blanket scratching lightly against your skin. The floorboards are cold beneath your bare feet as you swing your legs over the side of the pallet. For a moment, you just sit there, listening to the waking sounds of the medieval city around you, the distant crow of a rooster, the rumble of an early cart on the cobblestones, the muffled shouts of a baker already at his ovens. These are the sounds that filter through the ever-present, subtle aroma of your trade. Your workshop, which is essentially the front room of your small dwelling, awaits. It's not grand. There are no gleaming copper pots or bustling apprentices here. This is a one-person operation, a quiet testament to the meticulous, often overlooked, labor that went into preparing one of the medieval world's most prized commodities. Spices, as you well know, were incredibly valuable, a mainstream historical fact being that they were often worth more than their weight in gold, driving exploration and shaping global trade routes. And you? You're the one turning those precious, rock-hard nuggets of flavor into usable, fragrant dust. No pressure. Slowly, you rise and shuffle towards the shutters. Unlatching them, you push them open, letting in the pale morning light and a gust of cool, damp air that smells of wood smoke in the nearby river. The light illuminates the motes of spice dust that hang perpetually in the air of your workshop, a shimmering, fragrant nebula. It coats every surface, the rough wooden workbench, the stone floor, even the cobwebs in the corners have a distinctly gingery hue. You sometimes joke to yourself that if you ever decided to sweep properly, you'd probably lose half your inventory. It's a joke only a spice grinder would appreciate. Your tools are there, waiting patiently, the heavy stone mortars, varying in size, and their equally weighty pestles, worn smooth and almost to a polish by countless hours of grinding. They are the heart of your operation, simple yet profoundly effective. Historians still argue whether the specific designs of mortars and pestles evolved regionally, influenced by local stone availability and culinary traditions, or if there was a more universal, optimal form that was widely adopted. Yours are sturdy, unadorned, and feel like extensions of your own arms after a long day. You run a hand over the cool, smooth curve of your largest mortar. It feels like an old friend, albeit one that demands a lot of upper body strength. There's a small, gritty pile of what looks like coarse sand on your workbench. It's actually spillage from yesterday's final batch of black pepper, a reminder that your work is never truly done. One quirky, and probably entirely fictional, tidbit you heard from a traveling merchant was that some spice grinders in the Far East used specially trained monkeys with tiny pestles for the very finest, most delicate powders. You imagine a tiny monkey in a tiny apron, diligently grinding saffron, and a small smile touches your lips. It's a more entertaining image than the reality of your own aching shoulders. For now, though, the day is new, your arms are relatively fresh, and the faint, ghostly perfume of 1,000 spices is your alarm clock, gently nudging you towards another day of quiet, rhythmic, and profoundly mundane labor. The city is waking up, and soon, it will demand its daily dose of flavor, one meticulously ground pinch at a time. Your gaze, still slightly bleary from sleep, falls upon them, the steadfast, silent partners in your daily toil, the mortar and pestle. They sit on your sturdy wooden workbench, not as mere tools, but as extensions of your will, the instruments through which coarse, unyielding nature is transformed into fragrant, valuable dust. You approach them with a respect born of long association and shared labor. These aren't just objects, they are the heavy, thudding heart of your quiet world. The largest mortar, your primary workhorse, is a magnificent beast carved from a single, solid block of granite. Its interior is a deep, smooth bowl, worn into a perfect concavity by years, perhaps even generations, of relentless grinding. The stone is cool to the touch, a comforting, earthy solidity. Its sheer weight means it doesn't budge, no matter how vigorously you wield the pestle, a crucial feature when you're trying to pulverize something as unyielding as a dried ginger root. You pat its side, a silent greeting. "Morning, old friend," you might as well murmur. "Ready for another round with the peppercorns?" It, of course, offers no reply, its stoic silence of familiar comfort. Beside it sits a smaller mortar, perhaps made of marble or a finer-grained stone, reserved for more delicate or precious spices like saffron threads or cardamom pods. Its pestle is correspondingly lighter, more elegant. You use this one less frequently, but when you do, it requires a gentler touch, a more nuanced approach. Grinding saffron too vigorously, for instance, could bruise the delicate threads and diminish their vibrant color and aroma. A mainstream historical fact is that the value of spices like saffron was so immense that adulteration was a constant concern, and careful grinding was one way to ensure purity and quality, at least at your stage of the process. The pestles themselves are objects of simple, ergonomic beauty. The large granite pestle is a weighty club of stone, its rounded end fitting perfectly into the curve of the mortar, its shaft thick enough to provide a secure grip. It's heavy enough that its own weight does much of the initial crushing work. You've developed calluses on your palms in the exact places where they meet this unyielding stone, a permanent record of your profession etched into your skin. The smaller pestle is more slender, almost wand-like, allowing for finer control. You pick it up, feeling its familiar balance in your hand. These tools are not mass-produced. Each one is unique, shaped by the quarryman who first hewed the stone and then by the craftsman who patiently hollowed and smoothed it. Perhaps your grandfather, or even his grandfather, commissioned this very set. Or maybe you acquired them from a retiring grinder, the tools passing from one calloused hand to another. Historians still argue about the extent to which specialized tools for occupations like spice grinding were made by dedicated toolmakers or if craftsmen often adapted or created their own from readily available materials. Your set feels purpose-built, designed for one task and one task only, the relentless, aromatic reduction of matter. You run your fingers along the rim of the large mortar. It's chipped in a few places, tiny battle scars from particularly stubborn peppercorns or an overly enthusiastic downstroke. Each imperfection tells a story, a silent testament to countless hours of labor. You imagine the sheer volume of spices that have passed through this stone bowl over the years, mountains of pepper, rivers of cinnamon, hills of cloves. Enough to flavor the feasts of kings and the humble pottages of common folk alike. One quirky, and likely apocryphal, tale you heard whispered in the marketplace was that some very ancient mortars, used by generations of wise women to grind medicinal herbs, were said to retain a faint echo of the ailments they had helped to cure. If you listened closely on a quiet night, so the story went, you could hear the ghostly coughs and sighs of long-dead patients. You glance at your own mortars. Thankfully, they only seem to echo the thud of your pestle and the faint, spicy scent of their last occupants. You prefer your tools without a spectral medical history. Thank you very much. The mortar and pestle are more than just stone. They represent a fundamental human technology, one that stretches back to the earliest days of civilization. From grinding grains for bread to crushing pigments for paint, this simple combination of a bowl and a crusher has been indispensable. Your specific application, transforming exotic, far-traveled spices into usable form, places you in a long lineage of grinders, each contributing their small, fragrant part to the culinary and medicinal arts. It's a surprisingly profound thought for this early in the morning, before you've even had your first cup of weak ale. You take a moment to ensure they are clean from yesterday's work, though clean is a relative term in a spice grinder's workshop. There's always a faint residue, a lingering aroma. You wipe them down with a damp cloth, the stone darkening slightly where the water touches it. They are ready. Your silent partners, your uncomplaining colleagues. Soon, they will be filled with the day's first challenge, and the rhythmic, percussive song of your labor will begin anew, a sound that is as much a part of this workshop as the scent of spice itself. For now, they wait, heavy, solid, and imbued with the quiet dignity of honest, unglamorous work. The cool morning air, still carrying the dampness of the pre-dawn, floods your workshop as you finish propping open the heavy wooden shutters. The light, though still pale, is enough to see by, illuminating the familiar, dusty chaos of your workspace. Before the real work of grinding can begin, there are a few simple pre-work rituals to perform, small routines that mark the boundary between rest and labor, between the sleeping city and your waking craft. These aren't grand ceremonies, just the quiet, practical steps of a man preparing for a long day of repetitive, arm-aching toil. First, you attend to your attire. Or rather, your single, all-purpose garment, a long, loose-fitting tunic of coarse, undyed wool or linen. It's seen better days. Much better days. It bears the stains of countless spices, a yellowish tinge from turmeric here, a reddish-brown smear from paprika there, a general, all-over patina of indeterminate brownish gray that speaks of years spent in a cloud of fragrant dust. You give it a shake, dislodging a small puff of what might be cinnamon or perhaps just regular workshop dust. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes. Over this, you tie your apron. This isn't some frilly, domestic affair. It's a heavy piece of thick leather, stained dark and stiff with age and ingrained spice oils. It reaches from your chest to your knees, offering a vital layer of protection against the constant barrage of flying particles and the general messiness of your trade. The leather ties are worn smooth and thin in places. You secure them with a practice not behind your back. The apron feels like a familiar suit of armor, readying you for the day's fragrant battles. If you were a knight, this would be you donning your hauberk. Instead of facing dragons, you face mountains of nutmeg. Slightly less heroic, perhaps, but the arm ache is probably comparable. Next, a quick survey of the workshop. You ensure your various scoops and brushes are in their designated places. These are simple tools, a wooden scoop for transferring spices, a stiff bristled brush for cleaning the mortars, another, softer brush for gathering the precious finished powders. Organization, even in a dusty workshop, saves time and prevents costly mistakes, like accidentally mixing your high-grade ginger with the cheaper cassia bark. A mainstream historical fact is that guilds in medieval towns often had strict regulations regarding the quality and purity of goods, and for a spice grinder, maintaining the integrity of each individual spice was paramount. Your reputation, and your livelihood, depended on it. You might also take a moment to check your supply of small linen or parchment bags, or perhaps little wooden boxes, used for packaging the finished spices for customers. Are they clean? Are they dry? Is the string for tying them close at hand? These small details matter. A merchant who receives his finely ground cloves in a damp, slightly moldy bag is unlikely to be a repeat customer, no matter how fragrant the cloves themselves. Then, a moment of personal preparation. You might splash some cool water on your face from a basin near the door, the shock of it helping to fully banish the last vestiges of sleep. You run your fingers through your hair, attempting to tame it, though it's a losing battle against the inevitable coating of spice dust it will acquire throughout the day. Some spice grinders, you've heard, wore tight-fitting caps or headscarves to try and keep the dust out of their hair and off their scalps. You've tried it, but found it too warm in the summer months. You've resigned yourself to having permanently cinnamon-scented hair. There are worse fates, you suppose. At least you smell consistently delicious, like a walking medieval bakery. Historians still argue about the daily routines and working hours of medieval artisans. Were they dictated by daylight, guild rules, or simply the demands of their customers? For you, it's a combination of all three. You generally work from dawn till dusk, with a short break for a midday meal. If there's a large order from a wealthy merchant or a noble household preparing for a feast, you might work longer, perhaps by the flickering light of a tallow candle or an oil lamp, the shadows dancing on the walls as you continue your rhythmic grind. One quirky, and entirely unverified, fringe belief was that spices ground by moonlight held special magical properties, particularly for love potions. You haven't received any orders for love potion ingredients lately, thankfully. Your expertise lies in culinary and medicinal applications, not dubious romantic enchantments. Finally, you take a deep breath. The air, as always, is a complex tapestry of aromas. You can pick out individual notes, the sharp bite of pepper, the warm sweetness of cinnamon, the earthy depth of cumin. It's a scent that would be overwhelming to an outsider, perhaps even sneeze-inducing. But to you, it's just the smell of work. The smell of your life. Your simple pre-work rituals are complete. The shutters are open, your apron is tied, your tools are ready. You are as prepared as you'll ever be to face another day of turning hard, unyielding seeds, barks, and roots into fine, aromatic powder. The city outside is fully awake now, its clamor a distant backdrop to the focused quiet of your workshop. Soon, the first delivery will arrive, or the first customer will knock, and the real labor will begin. For now, there is this brief, preparatory pause, a moment of calm before the fragrant storm of the grind. The relative quiet of your workshop, previously disturbed only by your own movements and the distant city hum, is broken by a firm, rhythmic knocking at your sturdy wooden door. This is it. The day's work, in its most tangible form, is about to begin. You unlatch the door, and it creaks open to reveal a young lad, an apprentice from one of the larger merchant houses down by the docks, his arms laden with a large, roughly woven sack. "Master Grinder," he says, his voice still holding the squeak of youth, "a delivery from my master, Thorold the Pepperer." As per his standing order. He hefts the sack onto your workbench with a grunt. It lands with a solid, heavy thud that speaks of dense, valuable contents. You nod, your expression carefully neutral. Thorold the Pepperer is one of your regular clients, a well-established importer who deals in bulk spices brought in on the ships that ply the trade routes from the Mediterranean and beyond. His standing order means a consistent supply of raw materials for your grinding expertise. This is good. Consistent work means consistent, if modest, income. Let's have a look then, lad, you say, untying the thick cord that secures the mouth of the sack. As you peel back the coarse fabric, the unmistakable aroma, sharp and pungent, fills the air, momentarily overpowering even the resident sense of your workshop. Peppercorns. Thousands upon thousands of tiny, dried black peppercorns, the undisputed king of medieval spices. A mainstream historical fact is that black pepper, originating from the Malabar coast of India, was one of the most traded and sought-after spices in Europe for centuries, its value often used as a form of currency itself. Seeing a sack this full is always a mildly impressive sight, even for a seasoned grinder like yourself. The apprentice, meanwhile, produces a smaller, more carefully wrapped parcel from a satchel at his side. And these, master grinder. From the latest shipment. My master says they are of particularly fine quality. He hands it to you. This parcel is much lighter, and as you unwrap the layers of waxed cloth, a different, sweeter, and warmer fragrance emerges: cloves. Whole, dried cloves, their dark brown, nail-like forms instantly recognizable. They are indeed of fine quality, plump and oily, their scent rich and intense. Cloves, from the spice islands of Indonesia, were another highly prized commodity, used not only in cooking but also in medicine and as a component of pomanders to ward off unpleasant odors and, it was believed, disease. You examine a few of the peppercorns, rolling them between your thumb and forefinger. They are hard as little stones, their wrinkled surfaces dusty from their long journey. You take a clove and press it lightly, a tiny bead of fragrant oil appears. Good, you pronounce. Tell Master Thorold his goods are acceptable. I shall have the first portion of the pepper ground by tomorrow midday, and the cloves by the eve, if the saints are willing and my arm holds out. The apprentice bobs his head. Very good, Master Grinder. He hesitates for a moment. Master Thorold also said to mention, the bishop is hosting a rather large feast next week. He anticipates a significant order for a mixed spice blend. The usual tournament powder. Ah, tournament powder. Your lips twitch in a wry smile. This is a common, almost generic name for a robust blend of spices typically used for seasoning roasted meats at grand occasions. It usually involves a hefty dose of pepper, ginger, cloves, and perhaps some mace or nutmeg if the host was feeling particularly extravagant. Preparing such a blend means grinding multiple spices separately and then carefully mixing them in precise proportions. It's more complex than just grinding a single spice, and thus, more lucrative. Inform Master Thorold I shall be prepared, you say. The apprentice, his duty done, nods again and scurries off, eager to escape the fragrant confines of your workshop and return to the more varied, if less aromatic, tasks of a merchant's apprentice. You are left with your newly acquired treasures, a mountain of peppercorns and a precious cache of cloves. This is the raw material of your craft. Before they can grace the tables of the wealthy or soothe the ailments of the sick, they must pass through your mortars, transformed by your labor from inert, inedible pellets into potent, versatile powders. You scoop a handful of peppercorns. They feel cool and heavy in your palm. You bring them to your nose, inhaling their sharp, almost sneeze-inducing aroma. This is where the magic, or rather, the hard work, begins. Historians still argue about the exact logistics of the spice trade within medieval cities. Did grinders like you typically work directly for large merchant importers, or were you more independent artisans, sourcing your raw spices from various suppliers and selling the ground product to a range of customers, from individual households to apothecaries and kitchens? Your relationship with Thorold suggests a bit of both. He supplies you with bulk raw materials, but you also likely take on smaller, private orders. One quirky, though perhaps not entirely unbelievable, Anecdote you once heard was of a rival spice grinder in a nearby town who claimed he could tell the origin of peppercorns simply by their aura and the way they spoke to him when he held them. You suspect he was mostly just showing off, or perhaps had inhaled a bit too much mace that day. You rely on more prosaic methods, visual inspection, scent, and the information provided by reliable suppliers like Thorold. The arrival of these raw spices marks the true commencement of your working day. The preparatory rituals are over. The tools are ready. The materials are at hand. You select your largest, most robust mortar and its accompanying pestle. With a sigh that is part anticipation, part resignation to the familiar ache that will soon settle in your shoulders, you pour a generous quantity of the black peppercorns into the stone bowl. Their dark forms fill the bottom of the mortar, a silent challenge. The day's first task, the initial, forceful breaking down of these tiny, unyielding spheres of flavor, is about to begin. The quiet, mundane world of medieval spice grinding is now in full, fragrant swing. With the heavy stone mortar now laden with a generous first helping of Master Thorold's black peppercorns, you grasp the weighty pestle, its smooth, cool stone familiar in your calloused hands. You position yourself squarely before the workbench, feet planted firmly on the dusty stone floor. This isn't a task for delicate, tentative movements. This is about controlled force, about rhythm, about the patient, persistent application of muscle and will against the stubborn resistance of nature. This is the first crush. You take a deep breath, the sharp scent of the whole peppercorns already prickling your nostrils. Then, with a practiced motion that involves your whole upper body, not just your arms, you bring the pestle down into the bowl. Thud. The sound is solid, satisfying, echoing slightly in the small workshop. It's a sound as integral to your existence as your own heartbeat. A few peppercorns, startled by the impact, might leap optimistically from the mortar, only to land on the bench or the floor, a minor, expected casualty of the initial assault. You'll gather them later. Again, you lift the heavy pestle, and again, it descends. Thud. And again. Thud. This initial stage is less about grinding and more about cracking, about breaking the hard outer shells of the peppercorns, exposing the paler interiors. It's a percussive rhythm, a primal beat. You fall into the motion, your body remembering the familiar cadence. Lift, aim, drop. Lift, aim, drop. It's almost meditative, if meditation involved a significant amount of upper body exertion and the ever-present risk of a rogue peppercorn hitting you in the eye. You've learned to squint protectively during this phase. Slowly, with each impact, the whole peppercorns begin to yield. You can hear the subtle change in sound as they crack and splinter, the sharp thud softening slightly, becoming more of a textured crunch. Dust, fine and grayish-black, begins to rise from the mortar, carrying an even more intense, almost aggressive peppery aroma. This is why your apron is essential, and why you probably taste faintly of pepper even after a thorough, by medieval standards, wash. A mainstream historical fact is that spices were not only valued for their flavor but also for their preservative qualities, and pepper, with its antimicrobial properties, was particularly effective, helping to make less-than-fresh meat more palatable and last a little longer in an era before refrigeration. You are, in a way, contributing to public health, one sneeze-inducing cloud of dust at a time. As the peppercorns become partially broken, you shift your technique. The forceful up-and-down crushing motion gradually transitions into a circular, grinding movement. You press the pestle against the sides of the mortar, using its weight and the friction of stone against spice to further reduce the particles. Scrape. Crunch. Scrape. The sound changes again, becoming a more continuous, abrasive whisper. This is where the real work of pulverization happens, where brute force gives way to sustained, rhythmic effort. Your arm and shoulder muscles begin to burn with a familiar ache. You shift your stance, engaging different muscle groups, trying to find a rhythm that is both effective and sustainable. The dust cloud intensifies. You might pause to let it settle, or to wipe a stray bead of sweat from your brow with the back of your already dusty hand. Looking into the mortar, you can see the transformation. What was once a collection of distinct, round pellets is slowly becoming a coarse, uneven powder, a mixture of larger fragments and finer particles. It's progress, but there's still a long way to go to achieve the consistent, relatively fine powder that your customers expect. Historians still argue about the desired fineness of ground spices in medieval cuisine. Were they always ground to a very fine powder, or was a coarser, more textured grind sometimes preferred, perhaps for certain dishes or to retain more of the volatile oils? Your experience suggests that most customers, especially those paying top prices, expected a powder fine enough to blend smoothly into sauces and dishes without a gritty texture. Achieving this consistency with rudimentary tools is an art form in itself. One quirky, though entirely unproven, theory you once heard from a cook in a noble household was that the fineness of the pepper served at a feast was a subtle indicator of the host's wealth and attention to detail. The finer the pepper, the more labor, and therefore expense, had gone into its preparation. You try to grind all your pepper to a consistently high standard, regardless of who it's for. Professional pride, you suppose. You continue the grind, the rhythmic thud-scrape crunch a constant soundtrack to your morning. Your mind might wander. You might think about the news from the market, the price of ale, whether it will rain later. Or you might simply focus on the task at hand, on the feel of the pestle in your grip, the changing texture of the spice in the mortar, the subtle shifts in aroma. It's a focused, almost trance-like state. This is not a job for those easily distracted. A moment's inattention could lead to an uneven grind, or worse, a cracked mortar if you strike it too hard at the wrong angle. The first batch is always the hardest, when your muscles are still waking up, and the spices are at their most resistant. But as you work, a familiar warmth spreads through your shoulders and arms. The initial shock of exertion gives way to a steady, enduring effort. The pile of whole peppercorns in the sack seems daunting, but you know that with time, with patience, with the relentless persuasion of stone against stone, it too will yield, transformed into the fragrant, valuable dust that is the hallmark of your quiet, essential craft. The first crush is more than just breaking spices, it's breaking the inertia of the day, setting the rhythm for all the labor that is to follow. The rhythmic thud and scrape of your pestle against the granite mortar continues, a steady percussive beat in the small workshop. The initial aggressive attack on the whole peppercorns has given way to a more sustained, grinding motion. The air around you is thick with the sharp, pungent aroma of freshly crushed black pepper, a scent so familiar it's almost a part of your own skin. But pepper, as dominant as it is, isn't the only ghost of flavor that haunts your workspace. Your workshop is a repository of common household aromas, the olfactory echoes of countless past grindings, the very essence of medieval European kitchens. As you work the pepper, your mind might drift to the other spices you handle regularly, the ones that form the backbone of everyday seasoning, even for those of more modest means. Ginger, for instance. Not the fresh, juicy root that might be available in some far-off lands, but the dried, incredibly hard rhizomes that arrive in your workshop looking like gnarled, petrified claws. Grinding dried ginger is a true test of endurance. It's fibrous and tough, requiring considerable effort to break down into the fine, pale yellow powder prized for its warming, aromatic qualities. The scent of ginger, when you do grind it, is a clean, zesty fragrance that cuts through the heavier aromas, a welcome change of pace. It's often used in both sweet and savory dishes, a versatile spice that features prominently in medieval recipes. Then there's cinnamon. Or, more accurately, cassia bark, which was often sold as cinnamon in medieval Europe and is a close relative. It arrives in curled quills or broken pieces of reddish-brown bark. The aroma released when you grind cassia is sweet, woody, and intensely fragrant, a scent that instantly evokes thoughts of spiced wines, sweet pastries, and festive occasions. Grinding bark is a different challenge from grinding seeds like pepper. It's brittle and can splinter, requiring a careful, contained technique to avoid sending fragrant shards flying across the workshop. You have a particular way of angling the pestle to crush and then shear the bark fibers into a relatively uniform powder. A mainstream historical fact is that cinnamon/cassia was immensely popular in medieval cooking, used extensively in meat dishes, fruit compotes, and spiced alcoholic beverages like Humorous. Its warm, sweet profile was highly sought after. You might also regularly grind cloves, like the fine specimens Master Thorold delivered this morning. Once you get past their initial nail-like hardness, they powder down relatively easily, releasing that intense, almost medicinal, sweetly pungent aroma that is so distinctive. Clove powder is potent, a little goes a long way, and its scent can linger in the mortar and on your tools for days, a persistent, aromatic memory. They were used for everything from studding hams to flavoring apple tarts and, of course, for their supposed medicinal benefits, particularly for toothache. You sometimes wonder if the apothecaries appreciate the effort that goes into producing that tiny pinch of clove powder they prescribe. Mustard seed is another common inhabitant of your workshop. Small, round, and surprisingly feisty, these seeds need to be crushed to release their characteristic pungent heat. The resulting powder, when mixed with water, vinegar, or wine, creates the ubiquitous medieval condiment. The smell of freshly ground mustard seed is sharp, almost acrid, quite different from the sweet spices. It's a smell that clears the sinuses, that's for sure. Historians still argue about the accessibility of these common spices to different social classes in the medieval period. While the truly exotic and astronomically expensive spices were reserved for the nobility and wealthy merchants, were things like pepper, ginger, and mustard more widely available, perhaps in smaller quantities, to ordinary townspeople or even prosperous peasants. The presence of grinders like yourself in urban centers suggests a reasonably consistent demand beyond just the elite, though the definition of common would certainly vary. Your customer base likely ranges from the kitchens of noble houses ordering in bulk to the local baker wanting a small amount of ginger for his gingerbread, or even a housewife seeking a pinch of pepper for her family's pottage. One quirky, and perhaps a little sad, tidbit is the thought that some of the less scrupulous spice merchants might have adulterated their ground spices with cheaper fillers, things like ground nutshells, breadcrumbs, or even common, and less fragrant, local herbs. As a grinder of whole spices, you are, in a sense, a guarantor of purity, at least for the products that leave your workshop. Your customers trust that the powder you provide is 100% what it claims to be. This is why you are so meticulous about cleaning your mortars between different spices, lest a stray grain of cheap mustard seed accidentally find its way into a batch of precious cinnamon. The aromas that fill your small workshop are a testament to the interconnectedness of the medieval world. These common household spices, though perhaps less glamorous than saffron or grains of paradise, still traveled immense distances, passing through countless hands, across seas and deserts, before arriving at your door as hard, unpromising nuggets. Your labor is one of the final, crucial steps in that long journey, transforming them into the familiar scents and flavors that define the taste of an era. The rhythmic work on the pepper continues, each stroke releasing more of its potent fragrance, a reminder of the power held within these small, dried berries, and the quiet, essential role you play in unlocking it for the kitchens and apothecaries of your city. The air is a fragrant cloud, a familiar comfort, the very essence of your craft. While the familiar, robust aromas of pepper, ginger, and cinnamon form the daily olfactory backdrop of your workshop, there are occasions, rarer and more exciting, when your mortars are graced with substances far more exotic, their scents transporting you, if only for a moment, to lands you will only ever dream of. These are the spices that whisper of immense wealth, of perilous journeys, and of the almost mystical allure of the distant East. Handling these rare powders requires an extra level of care, a heightened sense of the preciousness of the material passing through your hands. Perhaps today, after you've dispatched a good portion of Master Thorold's peppercorns, a different kind of customer will arrive. Not a bustling merchant's apprentice, but a quiet, discreet servant from a noble household, or perhaps the personal steward of a wealthy guild master. They will carry not a rough sack, but a small, carefully sealed wooden box or a tightly bound silk pouch. Inside, nestled like jewels, might be a handful of grains of paradise. These small, reddish-brown seeds, related to ginger but with a pungent, peppery flavor and hints of cardamom and citrus, were highly prized and incredibly expensive. A mainstream historical fact is that grains of paradise, originating from West Africa, were for a time a fashionable and more affordable substitute for black pepper, though they eventually developed their own distinct culinary standing. Their name alone evokes a sense of the exotic, of a spice so wonderful it must have come from Eden itself. Grinding them releases a complex, warming aroma that is quite distinct from common pepper, a scent that speaks of luxury and refined tastes. Or maybe the small, precious parcel contains a few gnarled pieces of galangal root. Dried galangal, a rhizome similar to ginger and turmeric but with a sharper, more piney and camphoraceous flavor, was another exotic import. Its scent is intensely aromatic, almost medicinal, and a little goes a very long way. It was used in sophisticated sauces and meat dishes, particularly in the elaborate cuisine favored by the wealthy. Grinding galangal is tough work, similar to ginger, but the rarity of the spice means you approach it with a particular reverence. Each tiny particle of the resulting pale powder seems to hold a concentrated burst of exotic pungency. Then there's nutmeg and its lacy outer covering, mace. These two spices, from the same fruit of a tree native to the Banda Islands in Indonesia, the famed Spice Islands, were phenomenally expensive. Nutmegs are hard, round seeds that you might have to crack open before carefully grating or grinding. Mace, the reddish, web-like aril, is more delicate and often ground separately. Both release a warm, sweet, deeply aromatic fragrance that is instantly recognizable and highly coveted. The scent of freshly ground nutmeg and mace is the very essence of luxury baking and a key component in many spiced wine recipes. You handle these with the care you might accord to precious gems, knowing that a single nutmeg could represent a significant portion of a common laborer's weekly wage. Saffron, of course, is the king of kings in terms of rarity and price. You rarely grind saffron yourself, as it's usually sold as whole threads to preserve its quality and prevent adulteration. But occasionally, an apothecary might request a tiny quantity to be powdered for a special medicinal preparation, or a confectioner for a particularly lavish dessert requiring an evenly dispersed golden hue and delicate flavor. When you do handle saffron threads, carefully placing them in your smallest, cleanest mortar, their unique, hay-like, slightly sweet and metallic aroma fills your workshop with an almost sacred fragrance. The resulting golden orange powder is so precious that you meticulously scrape every last speck from the mortar and pestle, ensuring not a single grain is wasted. Historians still argue about the precise quantities of these ultra-rare spices that actually reached medieval Europe and how consistently they were available. Supply chains were long and precarious, subject to political upheavals, piracy, and the natural hazards of long-distance travel. The arrival of a shipment of nutmeg or grains of paradise in a European port was a significant event, and their prices could fluctuate wildly based on availability. For a humble grinder like yourself, the opportunity to work with such materials is a reminder of your connection to that vast, almost mythical global trade network. One quirky, and perhaps not entirely unfounded, belief was that the mere scent of some of these exotic spices could have beneficial or even magical effects. Some people believed that inhaling the aroma of cloves could sharpen the mind, or that nutmeg could induce pleasant dreams, a bit like that dream stick you encountered in another story, remember? While you maintain a professional skepticism, You can't deny the powerful psychological impact of these intense, unfamiliar fragrances. They are a brief olfactory vacation from the everyday. When you handle these rare spices, your movements become more precise, your focus more intense. You are acutely aware of their value, not just in monetary terms, but as tangible pieces of a distant, almost legendary world. The powders you produce from them are not just flavorings, they are symbols of status, of wealth, of access to the wonders of the globe. The rhythmic thud of your pestle might be a little softer, the scraping sound a little more careful. This isn't just pepper or ginger, this is a taste of the extraordinary, a fleeting brush with the opulent, and your role is to unlock that precious essence, one careful grind at a time, before returning to the more familiar, comforting, and decidedly less expensive aroma of everyday peppercorns. The sun, now past its zenith, streams through the open shutters of your workshop, illuminating the dancing motes of spice dust in its golden rays. Your arms ache with a satisfying, rhythmic weariness from the morning's labors. A significant dent has been made in Master Thorold's sack of peppercorns, and a small, fragrant pile of finely ground black pepper sits carefully covered on your workbench. The initial, aggressive crushing has long since given way to the steady, patient grind, and your workshop is a fragrant haven, a bubble of concentrated aromas amidst the general hubbub of the medieval city. Now, however, your stomach emits a distinct, unignorable rumble. It's time for your simple midday meal. You carefully brush the pepper dust from your hands and apron, though it's a largely futile gesture. You are, by now, thoroughly imbued with the essence of your trade. Your culinary preparations are as unpretentious as your workshop. There's no grand feast awaiting you, no groaning board laden with roasted meats and spiced wines. Those are the things your labors contribute to, not what they provide for you directly, at least not on a daily basis. Your meal is humble, practical, and designed for sustenance. From a small wooden chest in the corner of your living space, you retrieve your provisions, a hunk of dark, coarse bread, perhaps made with rye or barley, a small wedge of hard, salty cheese, and maybe, if it's been a good week, a slightly wrinkled apple or a few dried figs. You also have a jug of weak ale or cider, the common drink of the working medieval populace, safer and often more palatable than the frequently suspect water. This is the fuel that will power you through the afternoon's grinding. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. You don't have a separate dining area. Your workbench, cleared of its immediate grinding paraphernalia, often doubles as your table. Or, if the weather is particularly fine, you might sit on the doorstep of your workshop, watching the comings and goings in the narrow alleyway, a fleeting moment of connection with the wider world before you retreat back into your fragrant solitude. Today, however, you opt for the familiar comfort of your workshop, the air still thick with the lingering scent of spices, a sort of permanent, free appetite stimulant. You break off a piece of the dark bread. It's dense and chewy, with a slightly sour tang. You slice a piece of the cheese with your small, all-purpose knife, the same one you use for opening tough spice sacks or trimming unruly bits of dried ginger. The cheese is sharp and flavorful, a good contrast to the plainness of the bread. As you eat, your gaze might wander around your workshop. You notice the way the sunlight catches a particular cobweb, now probably more spice dust than silk. You observe the subtle patterns of wear on your stone mortars, the way your leather apron hangs on its peg. These are the ordinary, unremarkable details of your daily existence, rendered almost beautiful by their familiarity. A mainstream historical fact is that the diet of medieval artisans varied greatly depending on their trade, location, and economic success. While some, like butchers or bakers, might have had easier access to their own products, others, like yourself, relied on what they could afford from the local market. Your simple meal of bread, cheese, and ale is likely representative of a common working lunch for many in your station. It provided necessary calories and nutrients without requiring elaborate preparation or expensive ingredients. Sometimes, if you've recently ground a particularly aromatic batch of cinnamon or ginger, You might be tempted to sprinkle a tiny pinch, a very tiny pinch, mind you, as waste is anathema, onto your apple or into your ale, a small perk of the job. It's a subtle reminder of the valuable commodities that pass through your hands, even as your own fare remains simple. Historians still argue about the typical length and nature of the midday break for medieval workers. Was it a leisurely affair, or a quick, snatched moment before returning to the grindstone, quite literally, in your case? For you, it's usually the latter. There's always more spice to grind, more orders to fill. But you do allow yourself this brief respite, a moment to rest your aching arms, to replenish your energy, and to simply exist outside the rhythm of the pestle. One quirky, and perhaps not entirely far-fetched, notion is that the constant exposure to various spices might have had some unintended health benefits for grinders like yourself. Many spices possess antimicrobial or digestive properties. Perhaps your daily inhalation of pepper dust and ginger fumes, while occasionally sneeze-inducing, also offered a small measure of protection against common ailments. Or perhaps it just meant you smelled consistently interesting. You haven't noticed any particular immunity to the common cold, but you do find that the strong aroma of cloves can sometimes soothe a dull headache. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking. As you finish your meal, you wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and take a final swig of ale. The silence of the workshop, broken only by your own chewing and the distant city sounds, feels peaceful. The aromas, which might overwhelm a stranger, are to you just the familiar air of home, of work. The pepper dust still hangs in the sunbeams, a golden, pungent haze. Your simple lunch, eaten amidst this fragrant cloud, is over. Your brief pause in the day's labor is at an end. With a sigh, part contentment from the food, part resignation to the work ahead, you rise, ready to return to the mortars, to the rhythmic embrace of the grind, your body refueled and your senses steeped in the quiet, mundane, and wonderfully aromatic world of medieval spice grinding. The midday meal, a brief island of respite in the long sea of your working day, is now a pleasant memory. The sun has begun its slow descent from its zenith, and the afternoon stretches before you, promising more of the same, the rhythmic thud and scrape of pestle against mortar, the slow transformation of hard spices into fragrant powder, and the pervasive, familiar ache in your arms and shoulders. This is the grind, in every sense of the word, and its monotony is a constant companion. You return to your workbench, to the waiting pile of partially ground peppercorns or perhaps a fresh batch of stubborn ginger root. As you resume your labor, the initial burst of post-meal energy soon gives way to the familiar weariness. The movements, though practiced and efficient, are undeniably repetitive. Lift, crush, scrape, turn. Lift, crush, scrape, turn. Over and over and over again. Your mind, unburdened by the need for complex decision-making in this phase, is free to wander, or to simply succumb to a state of focused, almost meditative blankness. How do you endure it? How do you find ways to navigate the long, quiet hours of such repetitive, physically demanding work? It's not as if you can pop in some earbuds and listen to a podcast, or idly scroll through social media. Your distractions are far more subtle, more internal. Sometimes, you sing. Not loudly, not performatively, but soft, half-hummed tunes, old folk songs, snatches of melodies picked up from passing minstrels in the market square, or even the droning chants from the nearby church. The rhythm of the song sometimes aligns with the rhythm of your grinding, creating a sort of personal, percussive soundtrack to your labor. The lyrics are often forgotten or muddled, but the melody itself can be a comfort, a way to mark the passage of time. You might engage in mental arithmetic. How many pestle strokes to reduce a scoop of peppercorns to fine powder? You've lost count, but it's a lot. If you grind 3 measures of ginger today and 2 of cloves, how much will Master Thorold owe you, assuming he doesn't try to haggle over the quality of the cloves again? These small calculations, while not exactly thrilling, provide a minor intellectual diversion. Observing the minute changes in the spices themselves can also offer a strange sort of fascination. You watch as the coarse fragments gradually become finer, as the color subtly shifts, as the aroma intensifies and then mellows. There's a satisfaction in this slow, visible transformation, a tangible result of your efforts. You become a connoisseur of dust, an expert in the subtle textures and hues of pulverized botanicals. A mainstream historical fact is that the processing of raw materials into usable goods was the cornerstone of most pre-industrial economies, and your work, however humble, is a direct example of this value-adding labor. The sounds of the city outside your workshop provide a constantly shifting, if distant, backdrop. The cry of a street vendor hawking his wares, the laughter of children playing in the alley, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the tolling of church bells marking the hours, these are the sounds that punctuate your solitude, reminding you that you are part of a larger, bustling community, even if your own world is largely confined to these four dusty walls. Occasionally, a cat might wander into your open doorway, eyeing you with regal indifference before settling down for a nap in a patch of sunlight, utterly unfazed by the rhythmic thudding or the pungent aromas. You might exchange a silent nod with this feline visitor, a fellow creature appreciating the simple pleasure of a warm spot and a quiet moment. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of such repetitive, solitary labor on medieval artisans. Did it lead to a sense of alienation, or did the mastery of a craft and the production of a valuable commodity provide a deep sense of purpose and satisfaction? For you, it's likely a mixture of both. There are days when the monotony feels overwhelming, when your arms scream in protest, and you long for any kind of variation. But there are also moments of quiet pride in your skill, in your ability to transform something coarse and unrefined into a substance of value and delight. One quirky, and perhaps entirely personal, way you cope is by giving your mortars personalities. Old Granite, your largest mortar, is stoic and uncomplaining, but occasionally stubborn. Marble Maiden, the smaller one, is more refined but can be temperamental if you rush her. This silent, internal dialogue with your tools is a small, harmless eccentricity, a way to populate your solitary world. Remember the toll collector and his named lizard, tax evader? It seems a common human impulse to find companionship even in the unlikeliest of places. The very act of focusing on the physical task can be a form of escape. When you are truly immersed in the rhythm of the grind, your mind can empty itself of worries and anxieties. There is only the feel of the pestle, the sound of the stone, the scent of the spice. It's a demanding, physical meditation. The hours pass, marked not by a clock, but by the diminishing pile of unground spice and the growing mound of fragrant powder. The sun creeps across the sky, its light shifting through your workshop. And you continue, lift, crush, scrape, turn, a steady, persistent force against the unyielding nature of your materials, your mind finding its own quiet ways to navigate the long, fragrant, and deeply monotonous landscape of your craft. The afternoon wears on, the rhythm of your grinding a constant, dusty heartbeat in the workshop. While much of your work involves processing bulk orders for merchants like Thorold, a significant portion of your livelihood also comes from smaller, more specific requests, orders from the local apothecary or the bustling kitchens of wealthy households and taverns. These orders often require more precision, a careful measuring of specific powders, and sometimes even the creation of custom blends. A shadow falls across your open doorway, and you look up from your current task, perhaps diligently reducing a batch of fiery ginger to a pale yellow dust. It's a young woman, an apprentice or servant from the apothecary shop run by Master Elias, a few streets over. She carries a small, lidded basket. "Master Grinder," she says, offering a polite curtsy. Master Elias sends his compliments and requires a measure of finely ground senna leaf, and half a measure of powdered licorice root. For a new digestive draught he is preparing. You nod. Senna and licorice, common components in medieval herbal remedies. senna, a powerful laxative, and licorice, often used to soothe coughs and sweeten bitter concoctions. A mainstream historical fact is that apothecaries in the medieval period were not just dispensers of herbs and spices, but also skilled compounders of medicines, relying on a vast pharmacopoeia of botanical, animal, and mineral substances. Grinders like you played a crucial role in preparing these ingredients to their specifications. The senna must be particularly fine, the young woman adds. For quick infusion. It always is, you reply, though you make a mental note to give the senna an extra pass with the pestle. Apothecaries were notoriously particular, and Master Elias more so than most. You carefully wipe down your smaller marble mortar and pestle, ensuring no trace of the previous spice, perhaps the ginger, remains to contaminate the medicinal herbs. This is vital. Mixing a bit of ginger into a peppercorn blend might be excusable, though still unprofessional, but a stray grain of potent pepper and a soothing licorice powder could have rather unpleasant consequences for the unfortunate patient. You retrieve the dried senna leaves and licorice root from your stores. These are kept separate from your culinary spices, usually in clearly marked jars or sacks. Grinding dried leaves like senna requires a different technique than hard seeds or barks. They are brittle and can easily become too dusty if overworked. Licorice root is tough and fibrous, demanding patience. You work carefully, your movements precise, the resulting powders pale green for the senna and yellowish brown for the licorice. The aromas are different too, the senna slightly grassy and faint, the licorice sweet and anise-like. Once ground to the required fineness, you meticulously measure the powders using your small set of bronze or brass balance scales and tiny, carved wooden measuring spoons. Accuracy is paramount. Master Elias will be checking. You carefully pour the powders into small, clean parchment packets, folding the edges neatly and tying them with string. The young woman pays you in small copper coins, the standard currency for such transactions, and departs with her precious medicinal dust. Later, perhaps, another order arrives. This time, it's a harried-looking cook from a nearby nobleman's kitchen, his white apron already bearing the stains of a busy morning. "Master Grinder," he exclaims, slightly out of breath. His lordship has decided, on a whim, to host a banquet tonight. I need your best poudre d'ouse and a generous amount of poudre forte, and quickly. Poudre d'ouse, sweet powder, and poudre forte, strong powder, were standard medieval spice blends, though their exact composition could vary. Poudre d'ouse typically featured sweeter spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and sugar, another expensive commodity often handled by spice merchants. Poudre forte would be more pungent, with pepper, ginger, mace, and perhaps grains of paradise. Having these pre-ground or at least having the individual components ready for quick blending is part of your service. For this urgent order, you might not grind everything from scratch if you have some recently prepared stock. But you will certainly check the freshness and aroma, perhaps giving some components a quick freshening grind. You then carefully measure out the various powders according to his lordship's cook's preferred, and likely well-established, recipe, or a standard blend if no specific instructions are given. The kitchen boy waits impatiently, hopping from one foot to the other, no doubt imagining his master's wrath if the swan isn't perfectly seasoned. You work with your usual unhurried precision. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes with a nobleman's banquet spices are best avoided. Historians still argue about the exact recipes for these common medieval spice blends, as written sources are often vague, simply referring to a goodly amount of poudre d'ouse. The skill and reputation of the spice grinder would have played a significant role in interpreting these requests and delivering a product that met the expectations of discerning cooks and wealthy patrons. Your knowledge of how different spices interact, how their flavors balance, is a crucial part of your craft, even if it's largely intuitive, learned through years of experience. One quirky, perhaps apocryphal, story tells of a spice grinder who secretly hoarded the dust of disappointment, the tiny particles of spice that fell to the floor and were swept up. He would then allegedly sell this dubious, multi-spice floor sweepings blend at a very low price to the poorest taverns, claiming it was an all-purpose seasoning of mysterious origin. You, of course, would never dream of such a thing. Your workshop floor, while undeniably spicy, is not a source of commercial product. These specific orders, whether from the apothecary for a healing draught or from the kitchen for a lavish feast, break the monotony of bulk grinding. They require a different kind of focus, a more direct connection to the end use of your fragrant powders. You are not just producing a commodity, you are providing a crucial ingredient for medicine, for celebration, for the very fabric of medieval life, one carefully measured, custom-ground pinch at a time. The last rays of the afternoon sun slant through your workshop window, casting long, dusty shadows. The flurry of specific orders has passed, and you're back to methodically working your way through Master Thorold's sack of peppercorns, or perhaps a consignment of ginger that needs to be ready for tomorrow's market. The piles of freshly ground spices on your workbench, fragrant, potent, and valuable, represent a significant investment of your time and labor. Now comes a concern just as important as the grinding itself, storing this precious dust, keeping it dry, potent, and safe from contamination until it reaches your customers. Spice, once ground, is a delicate thing. Its potent aroma and flavor come from volatile oils, and these oils can dissipate over time, especially if the powder is exposed to air, light, or moisture. Your primary challenge is to preserve that hard-won fragrance and potency for as long as possible. A mainstream historical fact is that whole spices keep their flavor much longer than ground ones, which is why grinding was often done as close to the time of use as possible, or by specialists like yourself who understood the importance of proper storage. For the bulk spices you prepare for merchants like Thorold, you might use clean, dry, tightly woven linen sacks or small wooden casks. The key is to minimize air exposure. You'll pack the ground pepper or ginger tightly, perhaps layering it with clean, dry parchment if the container is large, before securely tying off the sack or fitting the lid snugly on the cask. These containers are then stored in the driest part of your workshop, away from the dampness that can seep up from the stone floor or through the walls, especially during wet weather. You might even have a raised wooden platform for this purpose. For smaller quantities, or for particularly precious spices like saffron powder, if you ever grind it, or mace, you would use smaller, more airtight containers. Glazed earthenware pots with well-fitting lids are ideal. The glaze helps to keep moisture out and prevents the porous clay from absorbing the spice's aroma. Small, turned wooden boxes with tight-fitting lids are also common, especially for spices that are not overly oily. Sometimes, for very small amounts for individual customers, you might use folded parchment packets, tied securely with string, but these are intended for relatively quick use, not long-term storage. Light is another enemy of ground spice. Direct sunlight can degrade the color and flavor of many spices. Your workshop, with its relatively small windows and often closed shutters, especially when you're not actively working, is naturally quite dim, which helps. But you still take care to store your finished products away from the direct path of any sunbeams that might sneak in. Under the workbench, or on shelves covered with a heavy cloth, are preferred spots. Then there's the ever-present threat of pests. Mice, rats, and various insects would find a stash of fragrant, nutritious spice powder a veritable feast. Your workshop cat, if you have one, and many medieval businesses kept them for this very reason, is your first line of defense. But good storage practices are also crucial. Keeping spices in lidded containers, off the floor, and ensuring there are no easy access points for vermin is a constant, low-level battle. You regularly check your stores for any signs of infestation, tiny holes in sacks, droppings, or the telltale trails of hungry insects. Historians still argue about the sophistication of food storage techniques in the medieval period. While grand manors and monasteries might have had dedicated, well-built cellars and storerooms, what about smaller artisan workshops like yours? Your methods are likely a combination of traditional knowledge passed down through generations of grinders and practical, common-sense solutions based on the materials at hand. The overarching principle is simple: keep it dry, keep it dark, keep it cool, or at least, not overly warm, and keep it sealed. One quirky, and perhaps slightly desperate, folk method you once heard for keeping weevils out of stored grain, and presumably, it might apply to some whole spices too, was to place a live toad in the sack. The theory was that the toad's presence, or perhaps its secretions, would deter the pests. You've never been tempted to try this with your precious nutmeg. You prefer a well-tied sack and a vigilant eye. It seems less likely to result in an accidentally spicy toad. The value of your inventory makes security another consideration, albeit a minor one compared to, say, a goldsmith. While your ground spices are valuable, they are also bulky and highly aromatic, making them difficult to steal and resell discreetly without attracting attention. Still, you ensure your workshop door is sturdy and barred at night. Your real wealth isn't in easily pilfered coins, but in these carefully processed, fragrant powders, the product of your specialized skill. As you carefully transfer a batch of freshly ground cloves into a small earthenware pot, tamping it down gently before securing the lid, you feel a sense of proprietorship, of guardianship. This isn't just dust, it's concentrated flavor, preserved history, the culmination of a global journey and your own painstaking labor. Protecting it, ensuring it reaches the customer in its prime condition, is an integral part of your craft. The scent of cloves fills the air as you work, a reminder of the potent magic held within these tiny particles, magic that you are now carefully tucking away, safe and sound, until it's ready to be unleashed. The light outside your workshop is fading fast, the long shadows of afternoon giving way to the deeper blues and purples of twilight. The last customer has departed, the final order of the day fulfilled and carefully packaged. Master Thorold's sack of peppercorns is significantly diminished, and various fragrant powders sit in their designated storage containers, awaiting delivery or sale. Your body aches with the familiar weariness of a day well spent, or at least, a day spent in constant, repetitive motion. Now, before you can truly call an end to your labors, comes one of the most crucial, if tedious, tasks: cleaning the implements. This isn't just a matter of giving your mortars and pestles a quick rinse. Oh no! This is a meticulous, almost ritualistic process, born of necessity and professional pride. Every stray grain of spice clinging to the stone, every smear of fragrant oil, must be removed. Contamination is the enemy of the discerning spice grinder. You wouldn't want tomorrow morning's batch of delicate saffron, if such a grand order ever came your way, to be tainted by the lingering ghost of today's robust black pepper. The horror! You start with your largest granite mortar and pestle, the ones that have seen the heaviest action. First, you use a stiff bristled brush, perhaps made from hog bristle or tough plant fibers, to vigorously sweep out any loose powder and larger fragments. You work around the curve of the bowl, dislodging particles from every crevice and imperfection in the stone. The dust rises in a final, fragrant puff, a last exhalation of the day's work. You brush the pestle with equal care, paying particular attention to its rounded grinding end. Next, you might use a slightly damp cloth to wipe down the interior of the mortar and the surface of the pestle. Not too wet, you don't want to soak the stone, especially if it's porous, but just damp enough to pick up the finer dust that the brush missed. The cloth quickly becomes stained with the color of the last spice ground, a temporary abstract painting of your day's labor. You rinse the cloth and repeat, until it comes away relatively clean. A mainstream historical fact is that cleanliness and hygiene, while perhaps not up to modern clinical standards, were still recognized as important in many medieval crafts, particularly those involving food or medicine. Preventing spoilage and ensuring product purity were practical concerns. For particularly oily or resinous spices, like cloves or some types of ginger, a simple wipe down might not be enough. In these cases, you might employ a technique of scouring the mortar. This could involve grinding a small amount of coarse salt or dry breadcrumbs in the mortar. The abrasive action of the salt or crumbs helps to lift any stubborn residues and absorb lingering oils. Afterwards, you meticulously brush out the salt or crumbs, ensuring none of it remains to inadvertently season your next batch of spices. It's a bit like using a natural, medieval version of scouring powder. You pay just as much attention to your smaller, finer-grained marble mortar and its delicate pestle. These are often used for more subtle or expensive spices, so ensuring their absolute cleanliness is even more critical. Any lingering scent or particle could ruin a costly ingredient. You might use a softer brush and a finer cloth for these, treating them with an almost reverent care. Historians still argue about the exact methods used by medieval artisans for cleaning their tools and maintaining workshop hygiene. Written records on such mundane, everyday practices are often scarce. We can infer a lot from archaeological finds of tools and workshops, and from analyzing the composition of surviving medieval products, but the precise, day-to-day routines often remain in the realm of educated guesswork. Your meticulous cleaning process is probably a combination of techniques passed down through your apprenticeship and your own hard-won experience of what works best to keep your spices pure and your customers satisfied. One quirky, and frankly rather disgusting, fringe theory you once heard from a tanner's apprentice, who probably knew a thing or two about unpleasant substances, was that some crafts used, shall we say, unconventional cleaning agents when water was scarce or particularly harsh residues needed removing. You shudder at the thought and stick to your more orthodox methods of brushing, wiping, and occasionally scouring with salt. Your spices deserve better than an unconventional cleaning. Once the mortars and pestles are deemed sufficiently clean, or at least, as clean as they're ever going to get in a workshop permanently permeated with spice dust, you carefully dry them with another cloth and return them to their places on the workbench. They sit there, gleaming dully in the fading light, their surfaces smooth and cool, ready for whatever fragrant challenges tomorrow might bring. Your scoops, brushes, and measuring scales are also wiped down and put away. Order is restored, or at least, your particular version of fragrant, dusty order. This end-of-day cleaning is more than just a chore. It's a mark of respect for your tools and your trade. It's a preparation for the future, ensuring that each new day, each new batch of spice, begins with a clean slate, or rather, a clean mortar. It's a quiet, mindful activity, a way to wind down from the physical exertion of the day. As you meticulously brush out that last stubborn grain of pepper, you are not just cleaning stone, you are closing a chapter, preparing the stage for the next act in the quiet, mundane, and endlessly aromatic world of medieval spice grinding. The last of the cleaning is done. Your mortars and pestles, now immaculate, by your workshop's standards, rest silently on the bench. The tools are put away. The remaining whole spices are securely covered, and the precious powders you've produced today are safely stored in their earthenware pots and linen bags. Twilight has deepened into a true, velvety darkness outside your now shuttered workshop. The only light comes from a single, flickering tallow candle or a small oil lamp, casting dancing shadows on the walls and illuminating the ever-present, shimmering motes of spice dust in the air. You sit for a moment on your simple stool, the day's weariness settling into your bones like a familiar old friend. It's in these quiet moments, after the labor is done, that you sometimes find yourself reflecting on the peculiar nature of your work, on the almost absurd value placed upon these tiny, fragrant particles you spend your days creating. The worth of a pinch, it's a concept that underpins your entire existence. Consider that small pouch of finely ground nutmeg you prepared earlier for the nobleman's cook. The actual physical quantity was tiny, perhaps barely enough to fill a small spoon. Yet, its monetary value could be equivalent to several days' wages for a common laborer. That pinch of warm, aromatic powder, destined to subtly perfume a custard or a pie, represented a significant expenditure, a visible display of wealth and status. You, the humble grinder, are the one who transforms the hard, unyielding nutmeg seed, brought at great expense from some distant, almost mythical island, into that potent, easily dispensable form. Or think of the black pepper, your daily bread and butter, so to speak. While more common than nutmeg, it was still a valuable commodity. A mainstream historical fact is that peppercorns were sometimes used to pay rents, dowries, or even bribes, their value relatively stable and universally recognized. The phrase peppercorn rent, still used today to denote a nominal sum, harks back to this era. Each pinch of pepper you grind, therefore, has a tangible, quantifiable worth, a small piece of a vast economic network. You handle substances that are, quite literally, a form of currency. Then there are the medicinal spices, the senna and licorice root you powdered for Master Elias the apothecary. A pinch of that senna leaf, carefully measured, could bring relief to someone suffering from digestive ailments. A touch of powdered licorice might soothe a hacking cough. In this context, the worth transcends mere monetary value and enters the realm of health and well-being. Your skill in grinding these herbs to the correct fineness, ensuring their purity, directly contributes to the efficacy of the apothecary's remedies. The worth of that pinch could be the difference between a comfortable night and a miserable one, or even more in serious cases. You look at your own calloused hands, stained with the faint hues of countless spices. These hands, through their repetitive, often arduous labor, create something that is highly sought after, something that people are willing to pay dearly for, whether for reasons of culinary delight, social ostentation, or physical healing. It's a strange paradox. Your work is dusty, mundane, and largely unseen by the end consumers, yet its product is anything but. Historians still argue about the true purchasing power of ordinary people in the medieval period and how much access they had to spices beyond the very basics like salt and perhaps mustard. For many, even a small pinch of pepper might have been an occasional luxury, reserved for special occasions. When you sell a tiny packet of ginger to a housewife from a neighboring tenement, you know that that pinch represents a careful allocation of her meager household budget. She will use it sparingly, making it last, its warm flavor a welcome treat in an otherwise plain diet. The worth of that pinch, for her, is measured in the small joy it brings to her family's table. One quirky, and perhaps slightly melancholic, thought that sometimes crosses your mind is how ephemeral your product is. Unlike a goldsmith who creates lasting objects of beauty, or a stonemason whose work might endure for centuries, your fragrant powders are destined for consumption. They are fleeting, their magic released in a burst of aroma and flavor, then gone. Yet, the memory of that taste, the comfort of that scent, can linger. And the demand is constant. As long as people desire flavor in their food and remedies for their ailments, there will be a need for your skills. The candlelight flickers, casting your shadow large upon the wall. The workshop is silent now, save for the faint crackle of the candlewick. You are surrounded by the ghosts of aromas, the potential for countless future meals and medicines held within your carefully stored jars and sacks. The worth of a pinch. It's what defines your craft, what gives meaning to your long days of grinding. It's the knowledge that these tiny, fragrant particles, born of your labor, travel out from your humble workshop to season the lives, in myriad small ways, of the city around you. And in that, there is a quiet, profound satisfaction. The tallow candle sputters, its flame casting a warm, wavering glow across your small workshop. The city outside has largely settled into the quiet of deep night. You're tired, the day's labor a heavy, satisfying weight in your limbs. Before you finally succumb to the call of your straw pallet, your mind, in that liminal state between wakefulness and sleep, might drift to the more esoteric side of your trade, the spice lore, the superstitions, the old wives' tales that cling to these fragrant substances like the dust on your apron. Beyond their culinary and medicinal uses, many spices in the medieval world were imbued with a certain mystique, believed to possess powers that went far beyond simple flavoring or healing. These beliefs, a mixture of ancient folklore, garbled travelers' tales, and perhaps a dash of wishful thinking, formed a rich undercurrent to the more practical aspects of the spice trade. As a grinder, you're privy to some of these whispers, these half-believed notions about the secret virtues of the powders you create. Take cloves, for instance. You recall hearing an old woman at the market swear that a pomander studded with cloves, carried on one's person, could not only ward off foul miasmas, the bad airs believed to cause disease, but also protect against the malevolent influence of the evil eye. Whether there was any truth to it, you couldn't say, but you certainly ground a lot of cloves for pomanders, especially during times of sickness in the city. Their strong, piercing aroma did seem to cut through less pleasant smells, which was perhaps magic enough. Nutmeg, that precious, egg-shaped seed, was surrounded by even more elaborate lore. Some believed it could enhance memory, or even induce prophetic dreams if placed under one's pillow, a far more expensive alternative to Barham's dreamstick, if you recall that other tale. It was also whispered to be a potent aphrodisiac. You've certainly had customers, usually furtive-looking men of a certain age, requesting finely ground nutmeg with a knowing wink, implying its use in some hopeful romantic endeavor. You just grind the nutmeg. What they do with it afterwards is their own affair, though you privately doubt its efficacy in conquering hearts. A good bath would probably be more effective for most of them. A mainstream historical fact is that the line between medicine, magic, and folklore was often blurred in the pre-modern world. Many substances that had legitimate, observable physiological effects, like senna as a laxative, also accumulated a layer of more mystical associations. The exotic origin of many spices only added to their mystique. Coming from distant, almost legendary lands, it was easy to believe they possessed equally extraordinary properties. Rosemary, though more of an herb than a true spice in the sense of being an expensive import, was one you sometimes ground for apothecaries or for inclusion in certain aromatic blends. It was widely believed to strengthen memory. Students would sometimes carry sprigs of it, or inhale its aroma before examinations. It was also associated with fidelity and remembrance, often used at weddings and funerals. The scent of rosemary, sharp and resinous, did seem to clear the head, so perhaps there was a kernel of truth to that particular belief. Historians still argue about the extent to which these folk beliefs were genuinely held by different segments of medieval society, or if they were sometimes exploited by charlatans or merely served as colorful embellishments to everyday life. Did Master Elias the apothecary secretly believe that the alignment of the stars at the time of grinding affected the potency of his licorice root, or was he purely focused on its known demulcent properties? It's hard to say. People often hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously. One particularly quirky superstition you encountered involved peppercorns. A very old woman, a regular customer for tiny amounts of pepper, insisted that if you carried exactly 7 black peppercorns in your left pocket, it would protect you from being struck by lightning. She claimed her grandfather had survived a terrible storm this way. You sold her the 7 peppercorns without comment. It seemed a harmless enough belief, and far cheaper than investing in a lightning rod, had such a thing even been conceived of. The power of scent itself was often considered almost magical. Incense, made from fragrant resins like frankincense and myrrh, which, while not spices you typically ground, were part of the same exotic trade, was central to religious ceremonies, believed to purify the air, carry prayers to heaven, and ward off demonic influences. The aromatic smoke from burning certain spices or herbs was also used in fumigation practices, to cleanse sick rooms or rid houses of bad luck. Your workshop, perpetually filled with a potent cocktail of spice aromas, must have seemed like a very powerful, if somewhat chaotic, magical space to some. As you finally prepare to lie down, the faint, lingering scent of the day's work, perhaps a hint of ginger, a whisper of clove, the ever-present bass note of pepper, envelopes you. You don't consciously subscribe to these superstitions. Your work is practical, your knowledge based on the tangible properties of the spices, their texture, their aroma, how they yield to the pestle. Yet, these old tales, these whispers of hidden powers, add a certain color, a certain depth, to the mundane reality of your craft. They are part of the rich, fragrant tapestry of the world you inhabit, a world where the line between the ordinary and the magical was often as fine and indistinct as the powders you so carefully create. And as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'd even wonder, just for a moment, if that pinch of nutmeg you inhaled today might indeed bring you a particularly interesting dream. The night has reached its deepest point, that profound stillness just before the first hint of dawn. The candle has long since guttered out, plunging your small workshop and adjoining sleeping alcove into near total darkness, broken only by the faintest sliver of moonlight finding its way through a crack in the shutters. You lie on your straw pallet, cocooned in the rough warmth of your woolen blanket, your body given over to the heavy, restorative embrace of sleep. The day's labor, the rhythmic grinding, the specific orders, the careful cleaning and storing, all these are now memories, impressions left on the quiet canvas of your mind. In these last moments before sleep fully claims you, or perhaps in the fleeting images of your dreams, you might find a quiet sense of satisfaction, a gentle understanding of your place in the world. You are a medieval spice grinder. Your life is not one of grand pronouncements or heroic deeds. You will not be chronicled in the annals of kings or celebrated in epic poems. Your legacy is far more subtle, more ephemeral, yet no less real. It is a legacy of scent, a fragrant contribution woven into the very fabric of medieval life. Think of the great feasts in the nobleman's hall, the tables laden with roasted meats, pies, and sweetmeats. Your poudre forte and poudre douce, meticulously ground and blended, are there, unseen but essential, transforming simple ingredients into culinary delights, adding warmth, complexity, and a touch of exotic luxury to the celebration. Each burst of flavor, each appreciative murmur from a guest, carries a tiny, unconscious echo of your labor. You are the silent, aromatic architect of their gastronomic pleasure. Consider Master Elias, the apothecary, carefully mixing his drafts and unguents. The finely powdered senna you provided, the perfectly ground licorice root, these are crucial components of his healing arts. When a fever breaks, when a cough is soothed, when a digestive ailment is eased, your work has played a small, vital part. The relief on a patient's face, the gratitude offered to the apothecary, these too, in a distant way, are a testament to the diligence of your pestle. A mainstream historical fact is that the spice trade was inextricably linked with the history of medicine, with many spices prized as much for their therapeutic properties as for their culinary uses. Your workshop is, in its own way, a small adjunct to the world of healing. Even in the humblest of homes, where a tiny pinch of your pepper or ginger is a carefully hoarded treasure, your contribution is felt. That small dash of warmth in a winter pottage, that subtle zest in a simple cake, these are moments of comfort, of small pleasure, in lives that are often hard and unadorned. You help to make the mundane a little more flavorful, the ordinary a little more special. Your workshop, with its perpetually fragrant air and its coating of multi-hued dust, might seem unremarkable to an outsider, just another artisan's cramped and cluttered space. But to you, it is a place of transformation, where hard, unyielding raw materials from the far corners of the known world are patiently, skillfully reduced to potent, valuable powders. Each stroke of your pestle is an act of creation, unlocking the hidden essence, the concentrated soul, of these botanical treasures. Historians still argue about the daily lives and social standing of artisans like yourself in the medieval period. Were you respected for your specialized skills, or largely overlooked as just another manual laborer? The truth is likely somewhere in between. You are not a powerful merchant prince or a learned scholar, but you possess a craft, a skill that is in constant demand. You are a necessary link in a long and complex chain, from the distant spice plantations to the tables and medicine chests of your city. As you drift deeper into sleep, the faint, lingering aroma of your workshop, that unique blend of pepper, cinnamon, clove, and a dozen other phantom scents, is your constant companion, a familiar, almost comforting presence. It's the perfume of your livelihood, the incense of your quiet, diligent life. You may not leave behind statues or epic poems, but you leave a trail of scent, a legacy of flavor, a myriad of tiny, fragrant contributions to the sensory world around you. And in the quiet satisfaction of a day's work honestly done, in the knowledge that your unseen labor brings savor and solace to others, there is a profound and wonderfully mundane kind of peace. The world of medieval spice grinders is indeed quiet, but its impact, one pinch at a time, is anything but. The profound quiet of the pre-dawn hour enfolds your small dwelling. The vibrant, sometimes overwhelming, aromas of your workshop have softened now in the cool night air, becoming a gentler, more diffuse perfume that hovers like a comforting memory. Your breathing is even and slow, the deep, untroubled respiration of a body truly at rest, the day's aches and strains temporarily forgotten. You are journeying now in those peaceful, shadowed valleys of deepest slumber, where thoughts dissolve into fleeting sensations and the world outside ceases to hold any immediate claim. The rhythmic thud of the pestle, the sharp scent of pepper, the warm sweetness of cinnamon, these impressions may surface gently in your dreams, not as tasks to be performed, but as soft, familiar echoes of your waking life, now transformed into the tranquil landscape of your rest. Allow the deep peace of this moment to settle over you, like the finest, most soothing powder. There are no orders to fill, no spices demanding your attention, only the vast, quiet expanse of the night and the restorative power of sleep. Feel the last vestiges of any lingering tension released from your muscles, as your mind drifts further from the concerns of the day, floating on a calm, dark current towards complete repose. The city outside sleeps, and you sleep with it, a small, integral part of its slumbering whole. The stories of spices, their distant origins and their potent effects, are now just gentle whispers in the background of your consciousness. Let them fade. Let everything fade into a soft, comfortable stillness. You have earned this rest. Your contribution, though quiet, is complete for now. Surrender to the gentle pull of sleep, knowing that when you awaken, the world, with all its needs and its flavors, will be waiting, but for this precious interlude, there is only peace. Sweet, untroubled dreams.